Have you allowed a racist, unrepentant criminal guilty of fraud, abuse, lying, 34 convicted crimes to poison your heart?
4 words. That's all it took to blow up a presidential campaign from inside a black church. That's how Bishop Paul S. Morton opened his tweet on November 2, 2019, right before telling 2 million followers not to vote for a man who'd bring his husband onto the White House stage. The target, Pete Buttigieg, the first openly gay candidate ever to run for president. The bishop says it's not about hate. The internet says otherwise, and within hours, this becomes one of the ugliest fights over faith, race, the 2020 race ever saw. So, is he telling the truth, or is this exactly the thing he claims he isn't? Before we get into it, hit subscribe and smash that like button, because what this bishop says next gets a whole lot harder to defend.
There is too much racism in this state. Many of you say you're white evangelists, white evangelicals. Act like it.
It's November 2nd, 2019. Pete Buttigieg, the 37-year-old former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and the first openly gay candidate ever to run for the Democratic presidential nomination, is climbing in early polls. He's polished, articulate, a Harvard and Oxford-educated veteran who built his campaign on Midwestern decency. And then Bishop Paul S. Morton, a man with 6 stellar awards, a Grammy-nominated son, and roughly 2 million followers across his denomination, posts a warning to Democratic voters. He tells them to use wisdom. He says, going too liberal won't win the White House back. And then comes the line that breaks the internet. He says he's not homophobic, but he doesn't believe the moment is right for a president to bring a husband onto that stage. He invokes scripture. He invokes marriage as he understands it in the Bible. He says it's not about hate, but for a lot of people reading it, the moment he denies being homophobic right before making a homophobic argument, that's exactly the problem. Replies flood in by the thousands. Some are furious, some, quietly, publicly, agree with him. And just like that, a private theological position becomes a national flashpoint. To understand why this mattered, you need to understand who Paul Morton is. Born in Windsor, Ontario in 1950, Morton moved to New Orleans in 1972 and built something extraordinary. In 1992, he broke from the National Baptist Convention to found the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship International, a charismatic Baptist movement that would grow to roughly 10,000 congregations and 2 million members. He's not a fringe figure. He's an institution, and his son, P.J. Morton, plays keyboards for Maroon 5 and has won 5 Grammys of his own. When Paul Morton speaks, a significant slice of Black America listens. The timing wasn't random. Buttigieg had launched his exploratory committee back in January 2019, and by mid-April, in front of more than 4,500 supporters in South Bend, he made it official. Polling at the time told 2 very different stories depending on who you asked. A national NBC News Wall Street Journal poll that February found a strong majority of voters, 68%, said they'd be either enthusiastic or at least comfortable with a gay or lesbian president, a massive shift from over a decade earlier. But a separate Politico Morning Consult poll found something colder. A plurality of Americans, 46%, weren't convinced the country was ready at all. Buttigieg was running directly into that gap and into a deeper, more specific challenge. Democratic strategist David Axelrod, who'd helped elect Barack Obama twice, said out loud what many were thinking privately. Buttigieg would run into resistance inside parts of the Black community, where attitudes toward homosexuality have historically lagged behind the rest of the electorate. It's one thing to hear a pundit predict that resistance in the abstract. It's another thing entirely to watch one of the most powerful bishops in the country prove the point himself in real time. Morton's post landed right in that exposed nerve, and he didn't walk it back. If anything, he leaned in. What followed was Morton doubling down, tweet after tweet. He pointed back to 2008, reminding critics that Barack Obama himself had once publicly held the same traditional definition of marriage, and wasn't branded homophobic for it. His argument, Obama changed his position over time, but Scripture, in Morton's view, hadn't changed, and neither had he. He framed his objection as theological, not personal, insisting he loved everyone, while standing firm on what he believed the Bible taught about marriage. He went further, revealing the strategic core of his thinking. His real goal, he said, was simply to get Donald Trump out of office in 2020. And he worried that nominating a candidate who was gay, liberal, and, he specifically noted, black, would make that harder, not easier, handing Trump a second term. If you were a pastor with 2 million followers, weighing your personal beliefs against what you thought was strategically smart for your political side, where would you draw that line? The reaction split almost instantly along predictable lines. Critics flooded Morton's replies, many making the same point. Others said the tweet was the final straw in their decision to leave church altogether. But Morton wasn't without allies. Pastor Dwight McKissick of Cornerstone Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas, publicly praised him, calling his stance a prophetic voice defending biblical truth. Conservative black clergy rallied around Morton as a man standing on conviction, not bigotry, reopening a fault line inside black Christianity that had been simmering for decades. Here's where the story stops being about one tweet and starts being about something much bigger. Because behind the hashtags and the quote tweets sat a quieter, harder truth. Roughly 86% of LGBTQ+ people in America were raised inside a faith community. 2/3 of LGBTQ+ adults raised Christian have since left the church entirely. And of those who left, nearly half say mistreatment over their identity was a driving reason. For black LGBTQ+ Christians specifically, the picture is more complicated still. A Williams Institute study found that more than half who were raised Christian stayed Christian, choosing to remain rooted in a faith tradition that, for many, still hasn't fully made peace with who they are. That's the human cost sitting underneath Morton's tweet. Not an abstract culture war talking point. Real people in real pews deciding whether the church that raised them still has room for them. This wasn't just a political prediction gone viral. For a lot of people watching, it was a Sunday morning question they'd been quietly asking their whole lives, answered in public by someone they used to trust. Buttigieg, for his part, never directly engaged Morton by name. When asked generally about hostility he faced on the campaign trail, he said simply that he tries to meet it with compassion, adding that he didn't believe it reflected most people's views. So where did everyone land? Morton never retracted a word. He later went further, publicly declaring himself an independent voter, citing the Democratic Party's direction on issues like same-sex marriage as part of his reasoning. He remains pastor of Changing a Generation Full Gospel Baptist Church in Atlanta to this day. The fellowship he built now answers to presiding Bishop Joseph W. Walker III. Buttigieg's campaign ended in March 2020, but his story didn't end there. By January 2021, he was confirmed as U.S. Secretary of Transportation, becoming the first openly LGBTQ cabinet member in American history. Did Morton's tweet actually move a single black voter away from Buttigieg, or did it just put words to a divide that was already there? What do you think? No lawsuit followed, no resignation, no apology, just a fault line left exactly where it was. Paul Morton built a fellowship that's lifted up millions of people across this country. That's true. It's also true that his words, in November 2019, made some of those same people feel like the door home had quietly narrowed. Both things happened. Neither one erases the other. Maybe that's the real story here. Not a villain, not a hero, just the oldest American argument: who gets to belong and who gets to decide. Where do you land on it? Drop your take in the comments, and if this kept you watching to the end, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.